we are diving into something monumental and, frankly, absolutely critical that's happening right now in Cambodia.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about a recent move by the Cambodian government to dramatically, and I mean dramatically, strengthen its laws against denying the horrific crimes of the Khmer Rouge.
That period under Pol Pot from 1975 to 79.
Exactly. And it just begs the question, why now? Why is a new, much tougher law needed nearly 50 years after the regime fell?
Well, that's the core of it, isn't it? When you look at history, it's really rare for a modern government to feel this compelled decades later to create such severe penalties just to, affirm a historical truth. And the answer, which is what we're going to explore, lies not just in the overwhelming scale of the cruelty back then, but in this lingering political denial that keeps surfacing today.
And that leads us right to our mission for this deep dive. We're going to give you a shortcut to understanding this whole struggle over history, over memory. We'll be covering the politics behind this new law.
The immediate context.
Yes, and then the sheer historical scale of the Khmer Rouge atrocities. The killing fields, the numbers, but also what the international courts actually found. And, crucially, we're going to get into some grim personal accounts.
It's so important to move beyond just the statistics. I mean, 1.7 million people, the number is so big it can become abstract.
It's numbing.
It is. So we need to understand the institutional nature of the violence, the specific, mechanisms of terror, how they systematically targeted entire groups. The findings from the ECCC, the special court, are the legal pillars that Cambodia is now trying to protect with this new law.
Okay, so let's jump straight into that legislative action because it puts this whole topic squarely in the present day. January 25th, 2025, the Cambodian government, under Prime Minister Hun Manet, approves this new draft law.
And its purpose is explicit. There's no ambiguity. It's to punish anyone who denies the crimes of the Pol Pot regime. This is a very severe, very clear declaration.
It's not their first attempt at this, though, is it?
No, and that's a key part of the story. The timing and the escalation in severity is what's so telling. There was a law back in 2013 also pushed by Hun Sen, who's now the Senate president.
Right.
But that one only carried a maximum sentence of 2 years. The fact that they're revisiting this now and with such urgency, it tells you that the 2013 law just wasn't enough. It didn't have the teeth they needed.
And the new penalties they're striking. They're clearly designed to be a massive deterrent. We're talking about prison sentences from 1 up to 5 years.
And the fines?
The fines are huge. They range from $2,500 up to a staggering $125,000 US dollars.
Which, for Cambodia, that top figure is immense. It sends this very clear signal that the state sees genocide denial as a catastrophic offense, an offense against memory, against stability, against justice itself.
So what's giving this law its teeth, legally speaking?
It's the precision of the language. The law explicitly targets the denial of brutal acts, and then it defines them. Genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes.
So it's not just a vague historical statement.
Exactly. By using those 3 specific categories, the law is standing on very firm ground. Because those are the exact crimes that the Khmer Rouge leaders were convicted of by the ECCC, the International Tribunal. It's basically taking the court's verdict and embedding it directly into the domestic criminal code.
And the motivation, the stated goal from the government, is about preventing these crimes from happening again and, justice for the victims. But the immediate push for this came from Hun Sen himself back in May of 2024.
And that political push is really the key to understanding the urgency now. Hun Sen's argument was that there were still Cambodian politicians, active politicians, who refused to publicly acknowledge the genocide.
Wow. So this isn't about, random internet trolls.
Precisely. It seems to be aimed squarely at internal political figures, maybe groups who are trying to minimize or rewrite this period for their own political gain today.
And that explains the jump in penalties, from 2 years in 2013 to 5 years now.
A 2-year sentence might be seen as, a cost of doing business for a prominent person. But 5 years, plus a potential 6-figure fine, that starts to look like career destruction. It's meant to be prohibitive.
So this law is the government trying to basically solidify the historical record against internal corrosion, making the ECCC's findings a legally protected fact of history.
Yes, and the very need for that law, the need to threaten 5 years in prison to enforce a historical truth, it just underscores how fragile the political narrative around the genocide still is. For the victims, having the state affirm the absolute truth of what happened is vital. This law is meant to do that by suppressing denial completely.
Which means to really get the weight of this law, we have to confront the scale of what's being denied. The sheer, almost incomprehensible destruction under Pol Pot from 75 to 79.
The raw numbers are the foundation. Approximately 1.7 million Cambodians died. Just try to grasp that. That was somewhere between a fifth and a quarter of the entire population at the time.
A quarter of the country.
It's a scale of societal destruction that's almost unparalleled relative to the size of a nation.
And it was all driven by this radical ideology of year zero. The idea of dismantling everything, cities, institutions, families, and forcing everyone into these giant agricultural collectives.
And that brings us to the physical evidence, the killing fields or Kandong Chet. These weren't just a few isolated spots.
No.
Our sources say there were over 200 of these sites scattered all across the country, more than 20,000 mass graves. It wasn't a centralized camp system like in other genocides. This was decentralized, pervasive, murder carried out by the state everywhere.
And the most chilling part, the thing that connects it so directly to today's law, is how the evidence persists. The sources describe how human bones and bits of clothing still surface from the ground in the killing fields after heavy rains.
That detail is so profound. The earth literally cannot keep the secret. The evidence just keeps coming up year after year, forcing people to confront it. This is what the government is trying to legally protect from denial. The physical reality of it just contradicts any attempt at revisionism.
And then there's the brutality of the methods. This part. It really gets into the depravity of the regime. They deliberately avoided the cost of ammunition.
Right. They used crude farm tools. Hoes, axes, shovels.
Why? I mean, was it just about saving money?
I think it's deeper than that. It wasn't just about cost. It reflected their radical, anti-modern ideology. By using basic agricultural tools, they were reinforcing their vision of a pure agrarian society, while simultaneously devaluing human life to the point where a bullet was seen as too precious.
It also makes the violence so much more intimate, personal.
It does. It mandated this barbaric, close-quarters violence, often forcing low-level cadres to execute their own neighbors, implicating the whole collective in the terror.
And the sources document the specific atrocity of killing children by smashing their heads against trees before throwing them into mass graves.
There's no way to soften that. That specific method, targeting the most vulnerable, it defines the intent. It's an attack on the future of a society.
And then there was savage torture using electricity.
Yeah.
When we talk about this new law criminalizing denial of brutal acts, these are the very acts they're talking about. These details are not hyperbole. They're the established facts.
Absolutely.
So who were they targeting? It started with anyone tied to the old government, right? Or foreign governments.
Yes, but the paranoia was so broad, it quickly expanded. The systematic targeting of intellectuals, experts, scholars, that was central to their vision. They wanted to wipe the slate clean.
So doctors, teachers, engineers.
Anyone with specialized knowledge. They even targeted people for wearing glasses, which they saw as a sign of being an intellectual. It was a targeted demolition of the country's entire knowledge base.
This total destruction, physical, demographic, intellectual, is the backdrop. And against that, you can see why denial is seen as such a profound threat.
And that brings us from the raw history to the judicial process, because the findings of the ECCC, the court, are the legal bedrock for this new 2025 law. What's so critical here is how the court defines specific acts of genocide against identifiable groups.
Right. The ECCC, the Extraordinary Chambers and the Courts of Cambodia. We should just remind everyone this was a joint UN-Cambodia body, a hybrid tribunal.
A very complex arrangement which speaks to the weight of the crimes. And it yielded these crucial convictions. Nguyen She, Pol Pot's number 2, his chief ideologue, was brought to trial. But maybe the most revealing early case was King Gek Eve, better known as Dutch.
Dutch, the commander of Tool Slang, or S-21.
The man directly responsible for at least 16,000 deaths there. And his sentencing shows the judicial gravity. He was initially given 35 years in 2010.
Which seems low.
Well, the Court of Appeals agreed. In 2012, they upgraded it to life in prison. That judicial hardening really emphasized the severity of his role in running that torture and death factory.
So how did the court define the crimes? Because that's what the new law is protecting.
This is the key legal distinction. In a landmark 2018 ruling, the ECCC found the regime committed both crimes against humanity and genocide.
And that distinction is important.
It's vital. The court found that crimes against humanity were committed against the broader Khmer population, the forced labor, the purges, the mass executions. But genocide requires a specific intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, a much higher legal bar to clear.
So they found that intent against specific groups.
Yes, two of them, the Cham people and the ethnic Vietnamese community. The court ruled that the regime's actions against these two groups were explicitly designed for their total eradication or removal based purely on their identity.
Let's start with the Cham community. They're traditionally Muslim.
And the persecution was catastrophic. Sources estimate that 36% of the Muslim Cham population, that's over 300,000 people, were killed in those 4 years.
36%.
The ECCC documented how they were forbidden from speaking their language, from practicing Islam. It was a clear, intentional cultural and physical destruction that met the legal definition of genocide.
And the second group was the ethnic Vietnamese living in Cambodia.
At the time, there were about 200,000 ethnic Vietnamese in the country. The regime systematically targeted them. By the time it was over, about 90% of that entire population had been expelled. And the court documented numerous mass murders specifically targeting Vietnamese communities in 77 and 78.
So the ECCC's ruling provides two distinct pillars of genocide on top of the broader crimes against humanity.
Exactly. And we should also mention the foreign victims. It shows the regime's extreme paranoia. People like John Dehurst from the UK, Kerry Hamill from New Zealand, Stuart Glass from Canada. They were often sailors whose boots strayed into Cambodian waters, captured, sent to S-21, and murdered.
I read that Kerry Hamill's brother visited S-21 years later, just trying to understand his brother's final moments. It's just heartbreaking.
It is. It underlines that the regime's paranoia was global. So when this 2025 law criminalizes denial, it's not just protecting a vague idea. It's protecting the specific, hard-won judicial truth about the genocide of the Cham and Vietnamese and the crimes against humanity suffered by the Khmer majority.
And to make that horror concrete, we have to talk about that one location, Tuol Sleng, S-21. It's the perfect, chilling microcosm of the whole regime.
It is, and it shows how quickly a society can weaponize its own infrastructure. S-21 was originally a high school, Tuol Sve Prey High School, a place of education.
Place for kids.
The Khmer Rouge just turned the school buildings into one of the most notorious prisons and torture centers in modern history. The contrast is, it's a deeply unsettling symbol of the whole Year Zero collapse.
And in 4 years, about 17,000 people were detained there. And it wasn't a prison for holding people, it was a processing center for death.
That's right. People were tortured relentlessly to extract confessions, which were almost always fabricated, before being taken to the killing fields just outside the city and executed. Very few survived.
But they kept meticulous records, didn't they? That's one of the most haunting parts, the bureaucracy of it.
Ruthlessly bureaucratic, Dutch, the commander, insisted on it. They took photographs, wrote detailed confessions, biographies of the victims. It wasn't for history. It was out of this paranoid efficiency to justify the purges and trace these imaginary conspiracies.
And that paranoia meant the prison started to consume the regime itself.
Oh, absolutely. A huge number of the people tortured and killed at S-21 were Khmer Rouge cadres. They were purged in internal power struggles. The system of elimination just turned inward.
And today, it's the Tuol Sleng Genocide Museum. The physical evidence is all there. The cells, the torture equipment, the endless rows of victim photographs.
And that's the point. It's tangible, irrefutable proof. When a denier tries to minimize the atrocities, a physical place like S-21 stands as this immovable barrier to that claim. You can walk in there and see the faces of the 17,000 people. How do you deny that? That's exactly the threat to national truth that this new law is designed to eliminate.
The place itself is an immutable witness.
It demands acknowledgement.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit, because the brutality wasn't just internal. We have to look at the war crimes committed against neighboring Vietnam.
This is a really important question because it shows the regime's aggression was twofold. Internal genocide coupled with this brutal, aggressive international conflict.
Which brings us to a specific event, the Ba Chook Massacre.
Yes.
This happened in An Giang Province, Vietnam, right on the border.
Right, and this was in April of 1978, well before Vietnam's full-scale intervention. The source material is crucial here. Pol Pot's forces occupied the Ba Chook commune for just 12 days.
12 days.
And in those 12 days, they brutally murdered 3,157 innocent civilians. It's just the speed and the indiscriminate nature of the slaughter is staggering.
And the accounts of people trying to find safety are just
Hmm.
desperate, fleeing to pagodas to the mountains.
Yes, the Tambu and Philae pagodas. But these places offered no real protection. The sources tell the specific story of Hang Balay, a cave named after a man, Mr. Balay. His entire extended family, about 50 people, wife, children, grandchildren, were all discovered hiding in that cave and massacred.
They were hunted down.
They were. It shows the Khmer Rouge were actively pursuing and annihilating civilians who were just trying to hide and survive.
And out of this grief, the community built a memorial,
Bavash.
a Bachagashwar.
A Namor. And the original structure, built right after the massacre, was a very powerful symbol of the anger at the time. It was hexagonal and featured 4 arms holding 4 bloody swords thrust into the ground.
A monument of pure rage.
Exactly. It communicated this deep hatred and desire for vengeance. But that monument was changed. In 2013, it was renovated for better preservation, but also with a stated diplomatic goal. Gak Lai Kok, to set aside the past in the spirit of future friendship with Cambodia.
So the design changed.
Dramatically. The current design is an inverted lotus flower with 8 white petals. It was a conscious choice to reduce the visual sense of death and sorrow, shifting the tone from vengeance to solemn remembrance.
That's a fascinating shift. From bloody swords to a lotus flower.
It is. It reflects the complexities of post-conflict diplomacy. But even with the softened design, the core purpose is preserving the evidence. The ossuary still displays 11,159 sets of human remains.
About a third of the victims.
Yes, and they've been meticulously organized by age and gender based on forensic examination of the skulls. That systematic arrangement is, again, irrefutable physical evidence of the massacre right across the border from Cambodia.
So the truth is preserved, even as the architecture of memory changes.
And it's an act of memory. There's a collective death anniversary held every year. The community ensures those 3,157 victims are not forgotten.
Now let's get into the really visceral military accounts.
Yeah.
Because this gives us a view of the Khmer Rouge's methods when they were on the run, fighting against the Vietnamese army.
We're drawing from the testimony of a former sergeant from the Vietnamese Fourth Corps who was pursuing Pol Pot's forces in early 1979. And what he describes is a level of depravity that goes beyond combat. It's psychological warfare.
He talks about how they had to fight fiercely just to recover the bodies of their fallen comrades.
Right, and there's one specific horrifying example. A deceased Vietnamese soldier named Tu. The sergeant recounted that his body had a dozen patches of scalp slashed up and bloody, done by Pol Pot soldiers with their infantry shovels.
The same tools again.
The same crude tools. The Vietnamese soldiers saw it as revenge on the dead, an act of barbarism they just couldn't comprehend. It's a tactic designed purely to inflict psychological trauma, to demoralize.
And the horrors just continued into the jungle itself. The sergeant's unit found a weapons cache, but what they found nearby was even more disturbing.
This is where we see the final, horrifying consequences of the Year Zero ideology. Near the cache, in the baskets of starving local civilians who'd been forced into the jungle by the Khmer Rouge, they found dried human forearms.
Evidence of cannibalism.
Driven by absolute engineered starvation. The source material uses the phrase extremely dongsort, which means extremely painful or heartbreaking. The soldiers were witnessing the total societal collapse the regime had created.
You can't even imagine the psychological toll on those soldiers.
It was profound. The environment itself was saturated with trauma. The sergeant talks about seeing monitor lizards, kara, feeding on the decomposed bodies of civilians who had died of starvation near streams.
It's the sight of that.
It led to persistent psychological distress. Soldiers hearing phantom sounds at night, becoming so paranoid they'd demand to be on double guard duty. It just shows how the regime's legacy inflicted these deep-lasting mental scars on everyone who witnessed its aftermath.
And the Vietnamese military campaign itself, it was a huge operation designed to be rapid, thunk talk, to liberate Phnom Penh as quickly as possible.
And when you hear these accounts, the mutilation, the cannibalism, the trauma, you understand the absolute urgent necessity of that intervention. It provides the ultimate justification for a law that says this historical reality is non-negotiable. It cannot be denied.
So what does this all mean? We've traced this direct line from a law being passed in 2025 all the way back to the court judgments, the physical evidence at S21 and Bat Chuk, and the documented brutality.
And it all underscores the deep necessity for this new law. It means the memory of the genocide isn't just some settled history. It's being actively fought for right now in the legislative arena.
And the harsh penalties, the 5 years in prison, the huge fines,
Yeah.
it shows the government sees denial as a genuine present-day threat to the country, to the victims.
It's a direct response to what Hun Sen warned about, the presence of political revisionists. When you think about it, the fact that you still need both sophisticated monuments, like the one at Bachuk, that changed from swords to a lotus flower, and reinforced laws to enforce this truth.
It shows the struggle's ongoing.
It shows that the legacy of silence, or minimization, is as dangerous as the original atrocity.
You are now equipped with the details, the judicial, the physical, the personal, to understand why this fight is still happening, and that final poignant detail, that bones are still surfacing from the earth in the killing fields after it rains. It just hangs there. The ground itself refuses to forget. This new law is just another layer of protection for that fragile, hard-won truth.